There are stories that feel less like history and more like nightmares carved into the land itself. Stories that refuse to rest, no matter how many decades pass. Tonight, I want to take you back to New Jersey, to a case that has haunted locales for over half a century. A story where truth, rumor, and fear blur together until it's impossible to know what's real. This is the story of the death of Jeannette DePalma, a 16-year-old girl whose body was discovered under circumstances so chilling, so bizarre, that many still believe dark forces were at play. Some say witchcraft, others whisper about satanic cults, and some insist it was just another murder, hidden beneath the hysteria of the times. But one thing is certain. Whatever happened in the summer of 1972, it left behind a shadow that has never lifted. It began on August 7th, 1972, in Springfield Township, Union County, New Jersey. 16-year-old Jeannette Christine DePalma left her home that day, telling her mother she was going to take the train to a friend's house. It was the middle of summer. She had just turned 16 days earlier. Jeannette was like so many teenagers, full of dreams, still figuring herself out, but with her whole life ahead of her. But she never arrived at her friend's house, and she never came home. At first, her disappearance didn't cause a wave of panic. This was the early 70s. No Amber Alerts, no nationwide missing child databases. Teenagers sometimes ran off for a few days. Police often assumed there was a simple explanation. But Jeannette wasn't the type to vanish. Days turned into weeks, and her family's desperation grew. Flyers were posted, phone calls made, prayers whispered late into the night, and still, nothing. Until nearly 6 weeks later, fate delivered the first piece of the nightmare. On September 19th, 1972, a dog belonging to a Springfield resident came home carrying something in its mouth. At first, the owner thought it was a branch or maybe a piece of raw meat it had scavenged. But when they looked closer, their blood ran cold. It was a human forearm, still covered in decaying flesh, unmistakably human. Police were immediately called. A search began, combing the area around the dog's usual roaming grounds. And not far from there, atop a steep, rocky formation in Hoodile Quarry, a place locals had nicknamed the Devil's Teeth, they made a gruesome discovery: the rest of Jeannette's remains. The site itself was eerie even before her body was found. The Devil's Teeth, jagged cliffs and overgrown woods, the kind of place kids dared each other to visit. The name alone carried a sinister edge, whispered in the halls of Springfield High like an urban legend. And on that cliffside, Jeannette's decomposed body lay. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine a clear cause of death. She had been missing for weeks, exposed to the elements, to animals, to time itself. But it wasn't just the body that set off alarms. It was what surrounded it. Witnesses, including police, and local residents, who would later talk to journalists, described the discovery as unlike anything they had ever seen. They claimed Jeannette's body was surrounded by a strange arrangement of logs and branches, forming what looked like a crude coffin. Some said there were crosses made of sticks scattered around. Others whispered about a pentagram drawn on the ground. A few even swore there were animal bones nearby, like some kind of ritual sacrifice. The details varied from person to person, but the overall impression was clear. It looked staged, deliberate, as if someone wanted the scene to be found and feared. The police denied many of these details. Officially, they said there was no occult evidence, that the rumors were exaggerated, but the whispers spread anyway, faster than truth could ever catch up. And in the small towns of Union County, in the early 70s, those whispers took root in the most terrifying way. The coroner examined what was left of Jeannette's body. There were no obvious stab wounds, no gunshot injuries, no blunt force trauma that could be seen on the bones. The only hint, and it was a vague one, was that strangulation might have been the cause. But with the level of decomposition, it couldn't be proven. One detail did stand out. The amount of lead in her remains was unusually high. Toxicologists couldn't explain why. Had she been poisoned? Had she been exposed to something in the quarry? That question, like so many others, was left unanswered. And so, the death was ruled suspicious, possibly homicide, but never solved. If you lived in Springfield Township at the time, you would have felt the atmosphere shift almost overnight. Local pastors began warning their congregations about witchcraft in the area. Parents told their children not to go near the woods. Whispers spread about covens performing rituals at the quarry, about satanic groups using Jeannette as a sacrifice. The coffin-shaped log arrangement became the centerpiece of the rumors. People swore it meant occult involvement. The devil's teeth, the crosses, the supposed pentagram, all of it became part of a larger story, one that was bigger than Jeannette herself. Some even said she had discovered something she wasn't meant to see, that she had stumbled upon a ritual site, and for that, she had to die. It was never proven, but the fear was real. Early in the investigation, police did question one man. His name was never officially released, but locals called him Red, a homeless man who sometimes stayed in the woods near the quarry. For a while, it seemed like he might be a lead, but nothing tied him to Jeannette. No evidence, no witnesses. Eventually he was ruled out, and the case drifted into silence again. It's important to remember the time this happened. The early 1970s were already heavy with fear of the unknown. The Manson family murders had shocked the country just a few years earlier. Talk of cults, satanic rituals, and witchcraft was everywhere. Communities on edge were quick to connect dots that may not have existed. In Springfield, Jeannette's death became part of that hysteria. People wanted explanations, and when none were given, they filled in the blanks themselves. For decades, Jeannette's story lingered like a ghost, occasionally brought up in hushed tones, occasionally written about in Weird NJ, a magazine dedicated to local legends. But the official files seemed to vanish. When journalists and authors later tried to investigate, they found that much of the police documentation was missing, lost, misplaced, or destroyed, depending on who you asked. It wasn't until 2024 that copies of the files resurfaced, discovered by researchers Mark Moran and Jesse Pollock. And when they looked at the crime scene photos, they made a shocking claim. The occult angle might never have been real at all. The photos didn't show a pentagram. They didn't show ritualistic symbols. The arrangement of logs could have simply been fallen branches. Had the entire story been twisted by rumor and fear? Or had something been covered up? Even today, no one can say for sure. In 2021, nearly 50 years after Jeannette's death, a serial killer named Richard Cottingham, known as the Torso Killer, wrote a letter from prison. In it, he hinted that he might have been responsible for abducting and killing Jeannette. Cottingham has confessed to multiple murders, some dating back to the early 70s. Could Jeannette have been one of his victims? The letter was forwarded to law enforcement, but no official connection has ever been confirmed. It remains just another theory, chilling, but unproven. Today, more than 50 years later, a group called Justice for Jeannette continues to push for answers. They want the case reopened, re-examined with modern forensic techniques. They believe Jeannette's story deserves closure, that the rumors should be separated from the truth, that her family and her memory deserve more than whispers about witchcraft. But as of now, the case remains cold. So what really happened to Jeannette DePalma? Was she murdered in a ritual sacrifice, as so many believe? Was she the victim of a lone predator? Perhaps a drifter? Perhaps even a serial killer like Cottingham? Or was her death simply twisted by rumor, transformed into legend by a community desperate for answers? We may never know. What we do know is this: A 16-year-old girl left her home one summer day in 1972 and never came back. Her body was found in a place called the Devil's Teeth, under circumstances so strange that people still whisper about them half a century later. And sometimes, when you walk the woods of Union County at night, locals say you can feel it, the weight of that story pressing down on you, the sense that something lingers there still. Not just the memory of Jeannette, but the darkness that took her.
They say the most terrifying hauntings don't happen in castles or graveyards. They don't come from Gothic ruins or ancient battlefields. They happen in places that look ordinary. A rental house on a quiet street, a place where kids ride bikes, neighbors wave hello, and nothing ever seems out of place until the sun sets. In December of 2011, a family moved into 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. By all accounts, they were normal people. A hardworking mother, her children, and their grandmother. But the moment they settled into their new home, they discovered something was deeply wrong. It started with black flies in the middle of winter. It escalated to invisible hands choking them in their sleep. And soon, it drew in doctors, police officers, social workers, and a Catholic priest, all of whom left that house convinced they had witnessed something not of this world. This isn't just a haunting. This isn't just folklore. This is a case so thoroughly documented that even hardened skeptics were forced to question their disbelief. This is the true horror of the Ammons Demon House. Gary, Indiana, once stood as a proud steel town. In the mid-20th century, it thrived with jobs, factories, and busy neighborhoods. But by 2011, the city was a shadow of itself. Abandoned houses lined the streets, crime rates soared, and hope seemed to leak out of every boarded-up building. It was here, in the decay of a crumbling city, that LaToya Ammons, her mother Rosa Campbell, and LaToya's 3 children tried to carve out a life. They didn't have much money, and the small rental house on Carolina Street seemed like their only option. On the outside, the house was ordinary, modest, 2 stories, with a screened-in porch and a basement. But, as they would learn, the ordinary appearance hid something malignant. It was winter in Indiana, bitterly cold when Rosa noticed them. At first, just a few, black flies buzzing lazily around the porch window. She killed them easily enough, only to find them back again the next day. Then the next. Then the next. No matter how many she swatted, sprayed, or trapped, more returned. Soon, the porch screen shimmered with their bodies, dozens upon dozens, their buzzing like a faint static that never stopped. Flies in the dead of winter. A detail so unnatural it gnawed at Rosa's mind. In folklore, flies are more than pests. They're said to be harbingers of death, signs of corruption, omens of evil. But Rosa wasn't thinking of legends then. She just knew something was wrong. As days passed, new disturbances began. At night, Rosa heard footsteps climbing the basement stairs, slow, heavy. She waited for someone to emerge, but no one came. Another night, she heard the same footsteps, only this time they crossed the living room floor, right in front of her, though the room was empty. Other times, faint whispers echoed through the house. Shadows flitted across the walls. Objects moved just slightly from where they had been placed. One evening, Rosa swore she saw a dark figure, tall, human-shaped, pacing back and forth in the living room. She blinked, and it was gone. But the fear lingered. Soon, the entire family felt it. LaToya, exhausted from caring for her children, began waking at night with the sensation of hands gripping her throat, choking the air from her lungs. She would thrash, claw, struggle, only for the pressure to vanish when she gasped out a prayer. One of the children complained of hearing voices whispering in the dark. Another described seeing shadowy figures standing at the foot of his bed. The attacks grew more violent. At a family gathering, LaToya's 12-year-old daughter suddenly levitated above her bed, rising slowly, unnaturally, as though pulled by invisible strings. Screams erupted. Rosa and LaToya rushed to her, pulling her back down, praying aloud until the girl collapsed into sobs. The boys were no safer. LaToya's 9-year-old son began growling in a voice that wasn't his own. His eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. In that chilling, guttural tone, he said, "It's time to die." Then, louder, "I will kill you." The family was terrified, but also trapped. They had nowhere else to go. Desperate, LaToya reached out for help. She contacted doctors, hoping there was a medical explanation. Perhaps seizures, mental illness, stress. In April 2012, a physician examined the children. He noted their bizarre behavior. He witnessed one of the boys growling, snarling, his lips curled back like an animal. Another thrashed, eyes wild. The doctor wrote in his report, "Delusions of ghost in home." But he couldn't ignore what he had seen. That same day, Child Protective Services intervened. They suspected the children were being manipulated, perhaps even abused. But what they witnessed next would shatter that assumption. In the hospital, several staff members gathered. Doctors, nurses, a social worker, and the children. The 9-year-old boy began to growl. His eyes rolled back. Then, without warning, he walked backward up a wall. His body pressed flat, his feet moving steadily upward until he reached the ceiling. With an eerie flip, he landed on his feet. The room erupted in chaos. A nurse screamed. The case manager fled the room. The doctor shouted, "What just happened?" Everyone present signed sworn affidavits describing what they had seen. None could explain it. For the first time, outsiders, professionals, skeptics, became believers. The case reached Captain Charles Austin of the Gary Police Department. Austin was no rookie. With decades of service, he had seen every kind of crime scene imaginable. He didn't believe in hauntings, but curiosity led him to 3860 Carolina Street. Inside, his police radio malfunctioned, spitting static. His cell phone battery drained to zero in minutes. The air inside felt thick, oppressive. Later, reviewing his recordings, Austin claimed he heard faint voices, whispers buried in the static. He admitted, reluctantly, that he couldn't explain what he had experienced. Austin left the house a skeptic no more. LaToya turned to the church. She contacted Father Michael Maginot, a priest in Gary. Maginot was cautious, but when he visited the home, he saw enough to act. Rosa convulsed violently when sprinkled with holy water. LaToya's body twisted, her voice turned guttural. Maginot performed not one, but 3 exorcisms, the first in English, the others in Latin. He commanded the demons to leave, invoking the power of saints and scripture. During the rites, LaToya shrieked, cursed, and collapsed unconscious, only to jolt awake moments later. Each exorcism weakened the presence. Slowly, the attacks diminished. By summer 2012, the Ammons family had moved away. The house sat abandoned, but whispers about it spread through Gary. Locals avoided Carolina Street, crossing the road rather than walking past the property. In 2014, paranormal investigator Zach Boggins bought the house. He filmed a documentary inside, calling it Demon House. His team reported strange activity, illnesses, and violent behavior during filming. In 2016, Boggins had the house demolished, claiming it was too dangerous to exist. Today, only an empty lot remains. Grass grows over the spot where the foundation once stood, but those who pass by say they still feel something there, A weight, a coldness, a sense of being watched. The Ammons Demon House is one of the most well-documented hauntings of the 21st century. Nurses, social workers, doctors, police officers, and priests all left shaken by what they had seen. Skeptics insist it was exaggeration, stress, or group hysteria. But if even one witness told the truth, then what does that mean? What if evil isn't confined to myths? What if it doesn't live far away in some crumbling ruin? What if it hides in houses just like yours? And what if, when the sun goes down, it's already waiting inside?